an airplane has crashed into the World Trade Center. That is a live shot.
We heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out.
The images are seared into our collective memory, and the scars run deep. First, the unthinkable. Jimmy Dunn's company was on the 104th floor. The horror didn't take long to sink in.
You need to call your office, you need to call your office. The planes hit the World Trade Center, and you better prepare that everyone in your firm is dead.
Then, the unimaginable. The South Tower of the World Trade Center, 56 minutes after impact. John Duffy had more than 100 employees up there on the 88th and 89th floors. Most didn't make it out.
This is the place where 67 of our people were killed, including my son.
6 minutes later, the North Tower collapsed. Those twin towers were home to more than 400 companies, 50,000 employees. Some of those companies suffered losses so catastrophic, their very survival was in doubt. None was hit harder than Cantor Fitzgerald, Howard Lutnick's firm, at the very top of the World Trade Center.
So what we lost that day were all of our friends. 658 of our friends, every person who was at work that day. There was no way out.
This is the story of three Wall Street firms that were headquartered in the World Trade Center. Three powerful and prosperous businesses that were devastated by the terrorist attacks and all but written off. The numbers are barely comprehensible. Hundreds of employees, traders, lawyers, analysts, technicians, secretaries, gone. Decades of experience and expertise erased. Almost all their records destroyed. Their offices, down to the very chairs they sat on, obliterated. Yet a decade later, Cantor Fitzgerald, Sandler O'Neill, and Keefe, Bruyette and Woods haven't just survived. They're thriving. They've triumphed over tragedy. And when we come back, you'll find out how they did it.
Howard Lutnick loved the World Trade Center.
Huge buildings, two of them, right next to each other. Great hub of commerce, tons of people coming in. It was alive. And that's what made it a great place to work.
To the Cantor Fitzgerald CEO, those twin towers weren't just symbolic. They exuded something else, something majestic.
What I loved about those offices were everybody who worked there had the best views. Didn't matter who you were, didn't matter what your position was. If you had a window anywhere near you, or you had a hallway, you could just stop and it was drop dead gorgeous. You know, what was a better view? All of Manhattan at your feet with the Statue of Liberty. I mean, it was brilliant.
The world's a tough place.
Lutnick was only 34 when he became head of Cantor Fitzgerald, then the biggest broker for U.S. government bonds. His headquarters, what might have been the best piece of real estate in corporate America, the uppermost office floors, 101 to 105 of Tower 1. You couldn't get any higher.
September 11th was my son Kyle's first day of school. And my wife and I took him to school. We took that picture that we all have of ourselves, you know, a little wet behind the ears, me kneeling next to my son, me and my wife next to my son, all those sort of pictures, right around 8:45.
A minute after this picture was taken, the first hijacked plane slammed into Tower 1, the North Tower, between floors 93 and 99. Lutnick got a phone call from his office and raced downtown. By the time he arrived, the South Tower had been struck.
I got out of the car, I got to the foot of the building and I started grabbing people as they were coming out. And what I figured was there were people pouring out of this doorway. If I found someone who had worked on the 103rd floor, that means there were exits. And I got all the people around to grab people as they were coming out, because they were pouring out, asking to yell out what floor they were on. And the highest floor we got to was 92. And then we heard this sound. It sounded like a plane was coming in right over our head. So we thought another plane was coming in. So we started running. But what it was number 2 World Trade Center collapsing. So I'm running. I look over my shoulder, and there's a tornado chasing me. So I just dive under a car, and the world turns black. And I'm just trying to hold my breath. Just trying to hold my breath.
Like hundreds of others, Lutnick emerged from the destruction covered in ash. At what point did you come to grips with what had happened back at the office?
At that moment in time, I thought there couldn't possibly be enough oxygen for them to live inside, because I was outside and I felt that I was going to die. So
It started to sink in then.
Yeah, I was certain that they were all gone.
658 Cantor Fitzgerald employees, including Howard Lutnick's younger brother Gary, never had a chance. Today, Howard Lutnick is composed in front of the camera. A decade ago, his emotions were raw.
You have suffered such great professional and personal loss. What is the fate of your brother?
Well, my brother was on the 103rd floor. He worked for me, and
in those first terrible days, making frequent appearances on television, Lutnick became the human face of the tragedy. His firm had suffered the greatest loss of life, but surviving Cantor employees didn't give in.
I think what's amazing, and I think it's amazing, you have 300 people. They lost all their friends. They lost the person to their left. They lost the person to their right. And they call me up and they say, I want to go to work. I said, why do you want to go to work? Let's just go to funerals. They go, no, I want to go to work. I can't stay home. I can't stay home. I have to work. I have to do something.
The story was heartbreaking. Lutnick promised to provide for all the families of the Cantor employees who'd perished, even before he knew for certain what the final death toll was.
The reason they want to be in business, and there's only one reason to be in business, is because we have to make our company be able to take care of my 700 families. 700 families. And I have 700 families.
But Lutnick then made a decision that would haunt him for years.
Can't say it.
Appearing on Larry King Live a week after 9/11, he had to explain why he'd stopped issuing paychecks for those who'd been killed.
You see, they call me and they say, how come you can't pay my salary? Why can't you pay my husband's salary? Other companies pay their salary. Why can't you? But you see, I lost everybody in the company, so I can't pay their salaries. So they think we're doing something wrong. Can't pay their salaries. I don't have any money to pay their salaries.
It was a public relations nightmare. The sympathetic face of 9/11 was accused of being a heartless multimillionaire, a CEO who broke promises to his own people. In reality, Cantor Fitzgerald needed the cash. As a brokerage, it had to move millions of dollars in and out of accounts at lightning speed. And Lutnick had just lost most of the people and the computer systems that made it happen.
Howard Lutnick is a type of old Wall Street guy, just like Cantor was a type of old Wall Street firm. He was a rough-edged guy, trader, sharp elbows, not afraid to speak his mind, not afraid to be out there, no matter what. I mean, that's the culture of Wall Street.
Bloomberg Television managing editor Dan Colarusso has covered Wall Street for 2 decades. He says that if anyone was going to succeed at rebuilding, it would be Lutnick.
After the attacks, it took on a whole different thing. All that energy, all that drive, all that Wall Street push, went to rebuilding his firm and getting what troops were left on board and keeping everybody, buoyant or at least functional in a very difficult time. And that extended to the family, too. One of the great attributes of the old Wall Street firms is that there's a fierce loyalty.
I said, look, we have 2 choices. We can shut it down and go to our friends' funerals. Or, if we're going to go to work, we're going to have to work harder than we've ever worked before at a time where none of us want to work.
Lutnick mobilized Cantor's London and New Jersey offices. And together, they were ready when the markets reopened.
And we did it by not having rules. I mean, if someone in the room said they thought they knew how to do it, they did it. Whether they were the most junior person or the most senior or they were from a different division altogether, who cares? They cleared out, they tried it, sticking it together with bubble gum and shoestring, but it worked. And we opened for business and processed transactions. It was extraordinary.
Extraordinary and ultimately successful. Today, Cantor's headquarters are in a more modest building in Midtown Manhattan on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors. But Cantor is also much bigger. It is split into 2 firms, one public, one private.
That sounds like a good idea.
And expanded beyond its core business into investment banking, real estate financing, hedge fund services, and insurance. Howard Lutnick remains chairman and CEO of the whole organization. And he did make good on those promises to Cantor's 9/11 families. The families of the 658 would receive 25% of the firm's profits for the next 5 years, with all their health care covered for 10 years. A commitment made by Lutnick and borne by the entire firm.
They all made less money. They all agreed, on top of working for a hammered company where they could have gotten a job somewhere else and made more money, they stayed. They all stayed. And then on top of staying, they agreed to make 25% less to take care of their friends' families and give them $180 million that otherwise would be theirs.
Now that you have a chance to look back, you made some mistakes. What might you have done differently?
Well, I'm sure I made lots of mistakes, but, you know, there's never been a situation like this. If I had to do it over again, I would stand at the World Trade Center and wouldn't let anybody walk in the door. But other than that, you know, there's nothing I could have done differently because we did the best we could, and we're here in a positive place after the most negative of all circumstances.
Good to see you.
And I'm really proud of the men and women who work here. I think they are the most extraordinary people.
When we come back, corporate DNA.
People appreciated the fact that we were going to fight back. We weren't going to take the thing lying down.
And how it helped the firm Sandler O'Neill rise again. There are many companies, large and small, that make up the financial world we call Wall Street. Each has its own culture, its own unique DNA. Some are shaped by old traditions, others built around aggressive young leaders. There are corporate giants that move markets around the globe, and smaller, private companies that take pride in personal service. The investment banking firm of Sandler O'Neill is one of those.
Sandler was, and always will be a very focused place. It's a very, very simple place. We do not confuse our agenda and our client's agenda.
Jimmy Dunn is the firm's senior managing partner. His clients are regional and community banks, insurance companies, and real estate investment trusts. Some need help raising capital, others investment advice. And when he talks about doing business, he uses words like fairness, reputation, and integrity.
The Sandler guy or woman, they've got heart, they've got high energy, hopefully got high intellect, they are hardworking, and there's no feeling of entitlement.
Personal traits that would serve his company well in the wake of 9/11. Sandler O'Neill's offices were on the 104th floor of the South Tower. 83 people were at work that morning. Only 17 made it out alive. Almost half the company was lost, including 2 of Sandler's top 3 executives, co-founder Herman Sandler and Chris Quackenbush, the head of investment banking. Dunn survived only because he wasn't there. He was on a golf course that morning, trying to qualify for a tournament.
We didn't know for some time, and we didn't want to believe for some time in its entirety, that 70-odd people were dead, and there was nothing, as there was no remains of many of them.
Yet, that was the grim reality.
I knew after 5 hours or 6 hours, when I didn't speak to Chris Quackenbush, when I didn't speak to Herman Sandler, they would have crawled on glass to call me.
It would take many days for some to accept it. Loved ones still held out hope for the missing. But, like Howard Lutnick, Jimmy Dunn did not have the luxury of time. The families and the firm itself all needed attention immediately. Before 9/11, Dunn was considered the most laid-back of Sandler's senior partners. The terrible losses at his firm would change all that. In the days and weeks that followed, Jimmy Dunn would instill in everyone around him a sense of moral purpose. Osama bin Laden wanted to bring down American capitalism. Jimmy Dunn wasn't going to let him succeed.
And at that moment in time, I knew how we would respond, that we would do the opposite of whatever he would have tried to accomplish that day. So he'd like us to run, we'd stand. He'd like us to quit. We weren't going to do anything but that. We knew, I would say about 5 hours later, what we were going to do. And it was not hard. It was there was a esprit de corps within the whole firm. We set out to do it.
It was a physical reaction to getting punched, which is a great understatement, and reacting.
Reflex, literally.
There was not even a question.
Another partner, Jonathan Doyle, took charge of operations.
Find out where everybody is, and you didn't even ask yourself why you were doing it, but you were doing it. Find out who's around, who's good to go, and what I am most proud of is just about everybody who was alive showed up at that office the next morning, almost 100%.
Kate Lawton, the firm's general counsel at the time, remembers the challenges.
Everything you have in your company is gone, and you have to open for business in a very short time. I need space. I need computers. I need communications equipment. I need supplies. I need order tickets. I need a way to execute orders. I need all of these things I need to talk to my clients and tell them I'm still in business.
Longtime clients came to Sandler's aid with temporary office space. But that was just a first step. Everybody had to work the phones. Fred Price, a director of research, had to work the street, literally, negotiating a maze of chaos and police cordons to reach the firm's backup information that fortunately had been kept in a separate vault near the fallen Trade Center.
We had a unique problem in that all of our backup, everything we had obviously at the Trade Center was destroyed. So every computer, piece of paper, everything we had was gone.
Lists of clients, records of transactions, even phone numbers had to be reconstructed from memory. And those who knew the most, the traders who dealt with the street every day, were virtually all gone. A reality that haunted every thought, every decision.
I was in the office trying to open up the business side of it, and I remember saying out loud, well, get me Tom, just ask Tom Glasser, and he had perished. Well, just ask Mark Bruce. And I'm like, he's not here either.
And because they weren't there, because this was a close-knit partnership, everyone took responsibility for the families of dead colleagues. Stockbrokers and analysts and secretaries became grief counselors, funeral organizers, and forensic specialists. Fred Price was the point man for the family needs.
In many ways, it was extraordinarily gratifying because every day you just tried to make a little progress with each family. You just tried to help them get something done that day that needed to be done, whether it was identification, getting DNA, materials to the medical examiner's office had been set up, just all those different, just each day trying to find one little thing that you could do each day that got a little step closer to There was no closure here, but just a little step closer to getting forward.
They weren't just working for themselves or the firm. They were working for the friends who were no longer there. Commissions on trades from the accounts of deceased colleagues went directly to the family's estates. They also created the Sandler O'Neill Family Assistance Foundation to provide financial aid, including the cost of college education for the children of those who died.
It was exhausting. It was sad. But you knew you had to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And if you could keep putting one foot in front of the other, we would get there.
And get there they did, in a remarkably short period of time. In only 2 months, Sandler O'Neill was profitable again. Not one deal, not one client was lost. In 6 months, revenue was back to pre-9/11 levels. And the firm underwent a dramatic growth spurt, attracting top-notch talent.
I'll tell you one of the things it took after having probably the worst day in my life of luck, being 9/11 for a lot of my friends, was the amount of good luck we had after that. And we had a lot of it. We had a lot of well-wishers. Competitors became colleagues. People who didn't know you became people who rooted for you.
But this was about more than luck. In 2009, the University of Pennsylvania conducted a study of Sandler O'Neill's comeback and concluded that its resiliency was rooted in its character and the moral purpose it demonstrated in the midst of crisis. Jimmy Dunn couldn't have said it better himself.
I can't begin to tell you how many people cared about our situation. I think to some degree, people appreciated the fact that we were going to fight back. We weren't going to take the thing lying down. We were going to try to do the right things with building the foundation, try to take care of the education of our family members, try to take care of benefits for a good 10 years or so after, try to do those right things, and people felt good about working with us.
What Jimmy Dunn will not talk about, however, is his leadership.
You know, we've heard enough about Jimmy Dunn.
He wants everyone else at Sandler O'Neill to receive credit for the firm's success, including the 2 close friends he lost, Chris Quackenbush and Herman Sandler, whose pictures are still taped to his desk and to his windows. But ask anyone at Sandler O'Neill who deserves the most credit for their comeback, and they'll tell you, Jimmy Dunn, a leader who rose to the occasion.
Here you lead by doing. As he sometimes says, we're not teachers and we're not a think tank. We buy and sell things and give advice, and we just did as much of that as possible, and that was the best leadership we could have.
16.6, right?
15, when we return, KBW, the small firm that seized the day.
Many thought KBW was finished, but not John Duffy.
And changed its destiny. On January 31st, 2007, President George W. Bush paid a surprise visit to Wall Street. On the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, he was greeted like a rock star. It was, after all, this president who stood defiantly in the rubble of the Twin Towers after 9/11.
And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
5 years on, the president's ratings in the polls were at a record low. But the stock market was reaching record highs. So were Wall Street salaries, bonuses, and executive compensation. And that was a political problem for the president. He returned to ground zero to gently urge Wall Street to do the right thing. And he cited as an example one of the great stories from 9/11.
One New Yorker understood corporate responsibility is a fellow named John Duffy. John Duffy grew up in the Bronx. He became CEO of a Manhattan investment and research firm called Keefe, Bruyette & Woods. On September the 11th, KBW had its offices in the South Tower of the World Trade Center. That day, the firm lost 67 people, including John's 23-year-old son. Many thought KBW was finished, but not John Duffy.
You lost your headquarters. You lost a third of your employees. You lost your co-CEO, your son. Why didn't you give up?
You know, I think we wanted to prove it to the world, to the country, and to ourselves that, in fact, we could rebuild. And there was a sense of obligation to, thinking about the 67 people that we lost. We didn't want to have to go back to those families who just suffered the, utmost tragedy, say, besides losing your loved one and probably primary breadwinner, that, the firm had died also.
It almost did die. KBW's trading floor, its nerve center, and its executive suites were on the 89th floor of the South Tower.
Oh my God!
The second hijacked plane smashed into the building directly below KBW's offices. In the 56 minutes that the South Tower remained standing, only 14 employees from the 89th floor made it out alive. They were the ones who saw or heard the first attack on the North Tower and decided to evacuate by stairs and elevators.
The fire that I saw and the heat I felt was intense. I was frightened, and so whatever it was, I thought was serious, and I should get out.
KBW insurance analyst Cliff Gallant acted on gut instinct, but most stayed at their trading desks. The market was about to open. A lesson from the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993 was wait for help to come. On 9/11, that would prove a fatal decision.
It was confusing and not knowing what was going on. I think if you hadn't seen what I had seen and just rushed over afterward and saw that it was the other building, that your building was okay, I mean, there was absolutely no reason to think a second. Even if you knew that a plane had hit the first building, why would you ever think a second one was coming, right? And so it was. It made perfect sense to me that people would decide that you were okay and you could stay.
Evacuate or stay, the stairs or the elevators, a business trip that morning, a delayed train, even rush hour traffic. Small decisions and matters of chance would determine who would live and who would die. On the trading floor of Keefe, Bruyette and Woods today, there are only a few reminders of the hell they went through. A sculpture made from a steel beam, salvaged from Ground Zero. A chalice from Tiffany's, engraved with the names of the KBW employees who died. A painting of the American flag, a gift from a KBW family. It's one of John Duffy's favorite tributes.
The stripes are the names of the 67 people that we lost on 9/11 in alphabetical order. And see Chris Duffy there.
Duffy's son Chris was 23. He had joined KBW to work on the equity trading desk 1 year before 9/11.
Christopher was a great kid. It makes you realize how precious life is and how it can be cut short.
You leave 16-6, right?
KBW employees say they've always been a tight-knit family. You can see it in the relaxed atmosphere and the smiles. You can hear it when they complete each other's sentences. 9/11 only made those bonds stronger. Vice Chairman Tom Michaud, who survived because he was running a few minutes late that day, and Senior Executive Assistant Jackie Day, who was at home recovering from an operation.
We made it an integral part of who we were and not let it hold us back or affect the new hirings or the expansion of the business. It is part of us. Everyone that joins us knows it, but it isn't all of us. All of
That's
what
right.
we are.
We're not hostage to it or captive
Correct.
to it by
That's right.
any means.
No.
I think it's become a healthy part of our soul as we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
This small boutique firm, once known primarily for the quality of its research, found a new inner strength. Much like Sandler O'Neill, KBW could afford to help support the families of its dead.
For the memory of those who lost their lives on that day, we weren't going to give in to the terrorists. And also our feeling was we could do more to help the families if we had a robust and rebuilt firm.
Friends, clients, even competitors reached out to support KBW.
Temp agencies and delis and anyone that could offer their services. You know, the outpouring of care was tremendous. It was unbelievable, all the extent that people went to show that they knew who we were, who our people were.
One of the things we really learned in the months after 9/11, as we went out initially to recruit people, I'm not even talking about chasing customers, was how many people out there thought we had a wonderful brand name and a great platform.
It's the reason Frederick Cannon became one of those post-9/11 recruits. He's now the chief equity strategist at KBW.
I knew KBW from my years in finance working at banks. I knew the research analyst who didn't make it through 9/11. And I really just always appreciated the firm, their focus on financials. Most important, they're a Wall Street firm without the pretense.
John, I remember people saying KBW couldn't survive on its own. It needed to merge. It needed to be bought by a bigger firm. Why were they wrong?
I guess they underestimated us.
9/11 did begin, usher a new era on Wall Street, and that led to consolidation, deals, firms got bigger, and KBW was well positioned because they were trusted, they were knowledgeable, they were experienced, and they had gone through the 9/11 experience, and they had a certain amount of goodwill.
Like Cantor and Sandler, KBW's headquarters today are located in Midtown Manhattan on much lower floors, but there is nothing diminished about KBW itself. The firm has twice as many employees as it did on 9/11, 80% hired since the terrorist attacks. They've expanded in trading and investment banking and opened offices in Europe and Asia. They became a public company listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Annual revenue was $185 million in 2001. A decade later, $426 million, more than double. KBW now is a firm more willing to embrace change, more willing to take chances.
How did 9/11 change this place?
I think one of the aspects was it probably gave us a little bit more professional courage that we could do some things that maybe we hadn't done before. Some of these people.
It gave Duffy more courage as well.
I think it made me a little bit more decisive. I remind myself periodically that, you may not have as much time as you wish. So, if you need to do something today or sooner, don't procrastinate.
The challenges of the past decade have exacted a toll on Duffy's personal life. In addition to losing his son, he's now in the midst of a highly public divorce. Duffy would eventually write a book about his firm's experiences and personally bankroll several businesses that have little to do with banking. He even backed a young rock group that wrote a song in KBW's honor. John Duffy, Wall Street banker, became the executive producer of Random Robbery. Whether out of character or not, there is no denying the story of John Duffy and his firm is an inspiration. A story of courage and perseverance worthy of a presidential address.
It says something about John Duffy that the terrorist attacks only made him more determined to succeed. It says something about New York that there are countless stories like KBW's of hardworking men and women who picked themselves up and rebuilt bigger and better than before.
When we come back, three firms and the lessons they share.
5/8 bid.
Plus, a Wall Street like you've never seen.
Go, go!
We're done at 12. Every year on the anniversary of 9/11, Howard Lutnick's firms, Cantor Fitzgerald and BGC Partners, host an event unlike any other on Wall Street.
Trade.
Celebrities
We want 237.
Done, 237.
are invited to try their hand at trading stocks and bonds in the brokerage game. All in the name of their favorite charity.
And what we do today is all of our guys and all of our clients help us raise money to take care of 75 charities around the world. We do this in England, we do it in New York, we do it in all our offices across the country. And basically what we do is all of our guys decide no commissions. Every penny that we raise today will go to charity. Last year we raised over $10 million, and this year I hope we do better.
I don't really know what I'm doing or what I'm saying, but it all works out. It's all going to a great cause.
200 KBC.
It's not what you'd expect at one of the most competitive firms on Wall Street, but focusing on the needs of others, rallying around those in grief, became a common characteristic among the firms crippled on 9/11.
Need the dogs here.
The attack on the World Trade Center was an act of war. The site became ground zero. And the rallying cry at the devastated firms became, "Do it for our friends and colleagues." By rising again,
Pat, the Quad back to you, still for sale.
they would honor those who died. The survivors were instilled with a sense of moral purpose.
These were not some nameless, faceless, unknown employee number on a badge people to us. I could have told you every single name of every single person that worked at Sandler O'Neill on September 10th of 2001. And I knew every single one that didn't make it.
When those families kissed their loved ones when they went off to work that day, and then they didn't come home, is unimaginable. And they were not soldiers, they were not in the middle of the war. These folks were just going to work and then wanted to go home at the end of the day to see their families. And the tragedy of the loss was so great. Hard to have self-pity when you saw the challenges that those families had.
A sense of moral purpose. Not a phrase one normally associates with Wall Street, but in those first days after 9/11, it was key to survival. The remaining partners of Cantor Fitzgerald, Sandler O'Neill, and Keefe, Bruyette and Woods were wealthy enough to have walked away, but they didn't. Employees suffering psychological trauma came back to work, most the next day, and that in turn motivated clients to stay with the firms, motivated unpaid volunteers to walk in through the door, even motivated competitors to throw business their way.
A Charlotte company did a lot of the excavating of this.
Sandler O'Neill's Jimmy Dunn still keeps a few mementos from 9/11 in his office. A simple cross, crafted with metal from the debris of the World Trade Center. Photographs of the two partners he lost that day.
Well, that's a picture, one of the few pictures of Herman and I and Chris together.
He insists they made the company what it is today. They were the source of his motivation. Leading the recovery effort at Sandler O'Neill, he was guided by principles already embedded in the firm.
In total fairness, we don't sit back and set goals. The first thing you can do is survive. The second thing you can do is reward the best talent. The third thing you can do is get more talent.
Tapping the talent pools inside and outside the company would prove another key to each firm's successful recovery. They promoted, they hired, and they trusted that talent.
If you're fortunate enough to be a person who has a history of making good decisions, trust them. If you're fortunate enough to be around people who make good decisions, stay close to them.
And with new or newly recognized talent came new ideas, new opportunities that would accelerate their recovery. Sandler O'Neill had been close to selling itself to a larger company. Instead, it stayed independent and raised money from private equity.
RJ!
No, I do have it.
KBW, the boutique firm that specialized in research, went public and expanded. And the biggest player in the bond brokerage business, Cantor Fitzgerald, grew much larger and split itself into two companies.
Cantor Fitzgerald is the middle market investment bank, and then our public company is called BGC Partners, which has done brilliantly and has hired thousands of employees and grown itself, enormously. And, we've built the business, but it's completely different than it would have been. I can't imagine that I would have come to that decision but for 9/11.
From the heights of the Twin Towers to the depths of despair and back again, they have good reason to celebrate how far they've come. But would they ever move back to the new World Trade Center now under construction?
I think if we decided to go back there, if the executive committee thought that that was the best opportunity, you know, we'd go back there. And symbolically, I'd like to go back there. I'd go back there in a heartbeat.
Do I think it's going to be absolutely beautiful down there? And the memorial is really beautiful. Yes, but, you know, would I move right on top of the Trade Center site? No, because, you know, for the 100 or so people who still work at the firm, who were there then, you know, it would just be too hard.
Would you move back? No.
How come?
I think the emotional stress on those 70-odd employees who still work here, myself included, would be too much. Hard to show up at a place of business and keep your business thoughts focused when your personal thoughts, you know, are elsewhere. It'd be like, to me, trying to conduct business out of a cemetery.
Back there is Dick Grasso.
Jimmy Dunn keeps a photograph from the New York Stock Exchange, a group of executives, politicians, first responders, and survivors ringing the opening bell on the one-year anniversary of the stock market reopening.
There's Howard. Howard. John Duffy. There you are.
Yeah.
3 companies, 3 competitors, now bound together by a shared tragedy, shared experiences that have made them all more introspective. Jimmy Dunn is still moved by the letters he received from all over the world.
You know, when you get a letter from a school teacher in the Philippines saying that she's proud of you, you know, that goes a long way. Or a letter from a friend, or a letter from a father of a son saying that he wants you to rebuild the firm, that is very important to you.
I think when you go through something like 9/11, it causes you to realize how much, as you go through life, you depend upon others. That this is, you know, this is not a solo mission. It shouldn't be as an individual. It certainly can't be as a corporation.
It's not about money. It's about the mirror. What kind of human being are we, and who are we?
In many ways, they are now who they've always been. Tough, successful, fiercely competitive Wall Street firms. Yet adversity forced them to discover a reservoir of dedication, goodwill, and resilience that would shape their futures. They not only survived, they triumphed.